the next book, oh my gosh, the battery is dying. But it hasn't died yet. Oh, look at that. 26 minutes. 26 minutes and I only talked about 2-3 books. Damn, dog. I talk too much. Okay, so in the beginning of the first book, we are following our main character Esun, who okay, yeah. Okay. In the I feel like my English makes no sense. Wow, this is a 40-minute video already. Oh my gosh. Hey, how's it going? How's life? My name is Sophia. Welcome back to my channel. So for today's video, I am going to be doing my September wrap up. Now in the month of September, I read four books, I think. I DNF'd one book and it was disappointing, but yeah, so without further ado, let's get into the books I read in the month of September. So the very first book I attempted to read, I attempted to finish this in September, but unfortunately I ended up DNFing it, and that is going to be Star Daughter by Shweta Takrar. For those of you who might not know, in this story you are following our main character Shittal, who is half human, half star. One day she has an accidental flare-up and it sends her father to the hospital, and in order to save his life she needs the blood of a powerful star. So like she goes into the court of stars and she ends up getting roped into this competition that she wants no parts of, and our story goes from there. What can I say about this story except for the fact that it is probably one of my most disappointing reads of 2020. I was super excited, super hyped to have a story based on Indian mythology, because that's not something you see every day. And so I was hoping for something a bit more unique, a bit more fun, and that unfortunately isn't what I got. First things first, I wasn't the biggest fan of the romance. So in the story, Shittal has a boyfriend named Dave, and when we are introduced to Dave, they are already in a relationship, and I think I didn't like it because for me personally, the best part of a romance in a story is seeing the characters get together. And so the fact that they had already had an established relationship, I was just like, ah, there's no angst, there's no make my heart go boom boom boom, you know? So I wasn't a big fan of the romance in that aspect. I also didn't like how certain aspects of the romance were handled. So Shittal, because she is a half star, she has to keep it a secret, you know? She's living amongst us mortals, so she's got to keep this on the hush hush. So the only people that know she's a half star are her family and her best friend. But apparently her boyfriend Dave knows that she's a star and keeps that secret from her, which I was just like, if you know that your girlfriend is half star, like wouldn't you like want to talk to her about it or whatever? And so Shittal, in my personal opinion, is rightfully upset because in this story humans use the stars as muses. And so humans on their own aren't as creative as they could be. They get their inspiration and their influence from stars. And Shittal doesn't know if this guy is actually into her because he loves her or if he's into her simply because she's a star. And so when she finds out that he knows, she, in my opinion, is rightfully upset. She wants nothing to do with him. And then 5 pages later, she's just like, oh, I love him. We deserve to be together. And I'm just like, okay, I don't know what to say, sis. Do you, boo-boo, whatever. In terms of family, I thought Shittal had a very toxic family dynamic. So in the beginning of the story, we are told that Shitao's mother left her at like the age of 7, I believe. And so, in my personal opinion, Shital has every single right to be upset. She has every single right to be like, yo, you abandoned me as a baby. Why? I'm upset. I'm triggered. Like, we need to talk about this. But throughout the story, Shital kind of just lets it slide under the rug. I don't know if that's the saying. And I wasn't the biggest fan of that. I also thought that the grandma was very toxic, very manipulative, just like the mom. Her mom and her grandparents and her grandmother are like the worst. And it's never called out and it's never called into question. And I wasn't the biggest fan of that. And then like another thing it's just a lot. And another thing that this story has that I don't like is there's a mean girl. And mean girl characters are the freaking worst, in my opinion. I hate that trope with a burning passion. Like, if there's a mean girl in a story, I'm guaranteed to drop it down a star or two because I just don't like it. I hated it. But my biggest issue was Shital as a character. The author is constantly reminding us of Shital's motivation throughout the entire story. So constantly, Shital is like, I want to save my dad. I need to save my dad. Dad, I gotta save you. And then also, constantly throughout the story, you have Shital, who is just like, I don't want to be a part of this competition. I want to go home. I want nothing to do with the being a star or whatever. But her character actions don't line up with her motivations. So for one example, I think this might be considered a spoiler. So like I'll leave a timestamp on the screen somewhere to where you can skip to if you don't want to hear this. But because Shital wants to save her dad, and because she doesn't want to participate in this competition, there is another star from a rival family that's like, hey, you don't want to be a part of this competition, and you want to save your dad's life, so I'm gonna give you my blood so we can kill two birds with one stone. And then Shital is just like, no, I don't want your blood. And I'm just like, I don't understand. Because if your main priority is saving your dad's life, wouldn't you want this person's blood? Like, you're constantly complaining throughout the entire story that your only goal is to save your dad's life and you could care less about this competition. But as soon as this person offers you a way out, then you're just like, no. Like, in my personal opinion, that scene was completely unnecessary. And it didn't align with what we are being told her motivations are and her actions, if that makes any sense. But yeah, I ended up DNFing this at the 70% mark. I really tried to finish this. I really wanted to support this author, but I just couldn't get into the story, and like, it was putting me in a bit of a slump, I'm not gonna lie. The writing style is absolutely gorgeous. It's so lush and descriptive and very immersive, but I need more than just a good writing style. Like, I need to feel attached to your characters, or else I'm just like, I'm not in it. If you're not gonna have me attached to the characters, at least have the plot be engaging enough for me to want to continue. But the plot was weak. The characters I hated, and so DNF this one. This is a debut novel, so I do plan on reading other works from this author. I'm hoping that as she puts out more work, her writing and her stories will improve. So I will be keeping an eye out on Shveta Takrar. But yeah, also I didn't give it a rating because it's a DNF and I don't think it's fair to rate a book I DNF'd. Okay, the next book I have to talk about, I honestly don't know how to talk about this book without, I don't know, sounding like a complete fool. And that is going to be Sword of Kaigen by M.L. Wang. Now, in this story, you are following two main characters, two perspectives. The first one is Mamoru. He is a 14-year-old boy who lives within the Kaigenese Empire. But like there's like a lot of propaganda within this empire. And so because Mamoru has never left, he believes everything that the empire feeds him until one day this kid comes and challenges everything he believes in. The other character we're following, her name is Misaki. She is Mamoru's mother. She's like a middle-aged woman, which is pretty dope because we don't often see fantasy following older mother characters, so I thought that was pretty dope. Misaki is a very demure, very quiet housewife who lived a very exciting life, to say the least. And so what I really appreciated about this story was seeing Misaki's past and seeing how that timeline converged with the present day. I thought that was really well done. Also, in this world, there are different races of people, and each race of people controls an element. So the Kaigenese Empire controls water, and then you have other empires that control earth, wind, and fire. Yeah, but I would say Misaki is my favorite character because she is a strong female character. Now, normally when you hear people talk about strong female characters, it's always about how badass they are, how they can fight, how they can murder somebody with like their pinky finger. But Misaki, in my personal opinion, is a different type of badass. Yes, she can fight. Yes, she can murder somebody with her pinky, but she's also a very intellectual woman. She's also very open-minded. And another reason why I loved her character so much is because we get to see Misaki struggle with her identity as a mother, as a wife. And I thought that that was very interesting to see. And I thought it added a lot of character depth to her. I also really love Mamoru because Mamoru is just like a soft, innocent being, and he doesn't know any better, you know? You get to see this precious little baby, this insecure little baby grow up with somebody who's strong in his conviction, and I loved seeing that character development. In terms of Takeru is the dad of Mamoru and the wife of Misaki. Homeboy is a fucking asshole, okay? Like, he is trash throughout this story. It was very interesting to see how Emma Wong developed his character through like the last 25% of the book. I will say his motivations, even though they're explained in the end, it doesn't excuse the fact that he was trashed throughout most of the story. Me and Taylor from Made Between the Pages, we read this around the same time and we were discussing it, and one thing that we both agreed on is that we would have enjoyed having Takeru's perspective also throughout the entire story, because the thing about Takeru's character development is that the last 25% that we get his character development, we get to see why he is the way he is, but then he does a complete 180, and so the Takeru we know at the end of the story isn't the Takeru we knew in the beginning, and that part felt a little bit inconsistent. And I think it would have been beneficial if his perspective were added in throughout the entire story, so we could slowly see him develop into the character he turned out to be in the end. It would have made his character development a lot more consistent throughout the story. This story has a very unique, very interesting plot structure. So the climax of this story happens at the 50% mark, which isn't something I've ever seen a book do, and I thought it was actually well done. So like the first half of the story, we're building up to this climax, and the second half is just the characters dealing with the consequences of that climax, and I thought it was so well done. It made me cry. I'm not gonna lie, I cried a couple times reading this book because I was just so attached to these characters, and to see these poor babies go through so much pain, I wasn't ready for it. one critique, it's like a small critique that I have, is that a little bit towards the end, like the last couple of chapters, personally, I feel like we didn't need them, because even though I enjoyed the structure of the story, I will say it dragged on just a smidge, in my personal opinion, towards the end. And another thing is, like, the very last chapter, we're following a main character's perspective, Robin. It's not his perspective, but there's this character that is discussed throughout the story, and we get to see him pop up in the very last chapter, and personally I wasn't the big fan of it. And I understand that this is a prequel to her YA fantasy, the Theonite series, and so this last chapter is used to bridge the two books together, but personally I didn't care for it. I thought it was kind of boring. I had no interest in it. And so if you have no interest in reading the Theonite series, I would say personally you could skip the last chapter. That's just my opinion though. But yeah, another critique I do have is that I feel that the world building was a bit info dumpy at times. So one example is that Momoru is in class, he's in his history class or whatever, and so he's learning about the history of the empire, and so we're basically being told as Momoru is learning about the history, and it's just a lot of fucking information that I was just not ready for it. And I'm not gonna lie, it just went over my head, and I was like, you know what, it's fine, I'll be Confucius, I'll figure this out eventually on my own. That is how a lot of the world building is done within the story, because Momoru is so young, he's either having things explained to him, or because Misaki is well traveled, she's explaining things to other people. So like those are one of the two ways that the world building was done, and I felt like it could have been a lot more smoother and a lot more seamless than that. But personally, it didn't really bother me that much. But if you are picky with that kind of stuff, I will say be aware of that going into this story. And if you do decide to pick up the audiobook, I recommend getting, like, maybe, I don't know if there's a PDF available for the audiobook, but I would say get like a PDF of the terminology in the back, because I started listening to this on audiobook and I didn't purchase this until later on, and so because there's like a lot of words thrown at me, I was just like, I don't know what this means, but fuck it, we good. And so if you're a person that likes to be knowledgeable per se, I don't know, as you read, then maybe consider getting that. But other than that, I gave this a 4 out of 5 stars. It was so good, gut-wrenching, and I loved it. It's just so good. If you haven't picked this up, I highly recommend you do so. The next book I finished in the month of September is a book that I started reading in June. Oops. And that is going to be The Obelisk Gate by N.K. Jemisin. Now, in this world, there are these things called fifth seasons, which are post-apocalyptic events that kill off the majority of the population. In the beginning of the first book, we are following our main character, Esun, who comes home to find that her daughter has been kidnapped and her son has been murdered by her husband. So she goes on a vengeance quest to find her daughter and kill that mofo. I can't really say much about this without spoiling the first book. I will say that I enjoyed this book. I think it's well written. I think N.K. Jemisin is a genius, but I didn't enjoy this as much as I did the fifth season. So in the first book, the fifth season, we are following three main perspectives, and in the Obelisk Gate we are following 2 different perspectives. Well, one of them is the same, but the other one is Nasun, who is Esun's daughter. And the thing about Nasun is that I didn't really care for her perspective. Okay, this might sound petty or whatever, but like I'm not the biggest fan of following a child's perspective. I didn't find it intriguing in any particular way. As soon there is this mystery, would I call it a mystery? Would I call it a mystery? No, but like there's like this mysterious thing going on with the obelisk, and I was more interested in that part of the story. So every time we switched to Nasun's perspective, I was just like, no, 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 no. I want to know more about the obelisks. Like, let's go back, please. There wasn't much of a plot to this story, and I know the 5th season also didn't have much of a plot. The 5th season, I would say, is more character based than plot based, but that's even more apparent in this. So in this, the 5th season is in full swing, and so we're basically just following the characters as they try to live their day-to-day lives, and I wasn't as engaged with their day-to-day lives, if that makes sense. Another reason why I didn't love this as much as the 5th season is because like the 5th season is heavy on racial themes, and I don't read a lot of books that have heavy racial themes, and so I really appreciated it. I identified with the themes that she was trying to discuss, and I thought that they were so brilliant and well done. In this book, the themes weren't as prevalent as they were in the 5th season, and so I think that's another thing that took away from my enjoyment of this story. I know it sounds like I didn't like this story, but I did. I think N.K. Jemisin is a genius, and I would still highly recommend picking this up. But I did give this a 4 out of 5 stars, and I am super excited to continue on with The Stone Sky as well as the rest of Jemisin's backlist. The next book I read was our book club pick of the month, and that is going to be An Unkindness of Ghosts by River Solomon. You're following our main character Aster, who is a medic aboard this spaceship. Now within this spaceship, they are divided in different levels. So you have like the upper deckers, mid deckers, and the lower deckers, and it's segregated by skin color. So this is a sci-fi story that is inspired heavily by the antebellum South. So there are a lot of themes of racism throughout this entire story. For this story, I will say that there's trigger warning for death of a child, racism, and sexual assault, which happens off page. I had a really difficult time reading this story simply because, in my personal opinion, I don't think this is the type of story that is written for the sake of entertainment. And so because I am mostly an entertainment based reader, it was very difficult, I will say, to get through this book. The characters in the story are very unlikable. They're not meant to be unlikable. They're very complex, very troubled human beings, and they have a shit ton of trauma that they're going through throughout this story, and it's very interesting to see how each different character copes with their trauma. One thing I will say that Solomon really shines at is not only discussing just race, is also discussing intersectionality. So Aster, I believe, is neurodivergent. I've seen reviews that claim that she's on the autism spectrum. I can't really speak too much on that. So because of Aster's intersectionality, she does suffer a lot of racism from upper deckers because of her darker skin, and because she's neurodivergent, she suffers from a lot of ableism from members of her own community that don't understand her, who don't understand her. Solomon also touches on themes of white passing privilege. There is another character, I forgot his name, he's a doctor. He's a biracial doctor, and when we first meet him, it's hinted at that he might not be purely white, that his mom might be somebody else. And so because this person is white passing, they get all the privileges that the other Black people within this story don't. In terms of world building, even though this is a sci-fi story, it's not really focused on any of those sci-fi elements. It's mostly focused on these characters and watching them grow and watching them work through their internalized trauma and generational trauma as well. In terms of plot, I wouldn't say that the plot is the strongest either. Like, as I stated before, it's mostly focused on the characters, and so the entire story is very slow throughout the beginning, and like the last 25% of the story we get all the plot, and like shit hits the fan and it's crazy. This is definitely the type of story where like I read it and I didn't like it. I'm being completely honest. I wasn't the biggest fan of it. But as we were doing our live show discussions, the more I talked about this book, the more I appreciated it, the more I respected what River Solomon was trying to do, and I think they did a really good job. I didn't give it a rating because like I said before, I rate books off of my enjoyment, and I didn't enjoy this book, but I also feel like this isn't the type of book you read for enjoyment, if that makes sense. I would recommend picking up their book. It is a debut novel and it is impressive, to say the least. I will leave a link to our live show discussion down below if you guys want to check it out. The final book I read in the month of September was The City of Brass by S.A. Chakraborty. I know this was in my other TBR, my September TBR, but I ended up finishing it. Surprise! In this story, you are following our main character, Nahri, who is a healer and a thief in Cairo. One day she accidentally summons a jinn and she is forced to leave her home, and she is whisked away into this magical city called Davabad. In this story there are 3 major tribes. So you have the jinn and the devas. They're basically the same, but like I guess they have beef with each other. And then you have the Shafit, which are half jinn, half human. And so this is a very political heavy fantasy story, and I wasn't expecting it, to say the least. In my personal opinion, I think that the characters were well developed. Their motivations are clearly defined throughout the story, and they don't change much throughout the rest of the story. But I will say my favorite character is Ali. Ali is he's just a soft baby boy trying to do his best. And I don't know, something about that trope just makes my heart melt. And it's like, he's trying to do his best but constantly failing, and I think that just what melts my heart. It's like, oh my gosh, poor baby is so pathetic, but like protect him at all costs even though he could murder you. I don't know, I have a soft spot for like soft characters that could murder you. I'm weird, I know. In terms of Nahri, I loved her character. I think Nahri, I wasn't the biggest fan of Nahri, if I'm being completely honest. There are certain decisions she made, particularly towards the end involving Dara, that I was just like, I don't know if I personally agree with it. And she's also just trying to do her best in life under the circumstances she was given. But yeah, I will say that as the series has continued, I have grown to appreciate Nahri's character a lot more. Her character development, in my personal opinion, is one of the best in this story, and I highly appreciate that. The plot, in my personal opinion, isn't really there. It's mostly focused on the political aspects of this story. This is like very heavily political. So if I had to rank them, I would say political would be the top, character development, and then at the very bottom it's plot. So Chakraborty really takes her time exploring the different tribes within this story, their beliefs, their histories, their prejudices, their all of that, and how it creates tension between the different tribes. And I thought that that was very well done. It was masterfully done in my personal opinion. The world building in my personal opinion is pretty straightforward because Nahri is new to this world. So as Nahri is getting things explained to her, that is how we are learning about this world. I know that that particular style of world building could be seen as info dumpy, but personally I don't mind. In terms of writing style, Chakraborty has a very beautiful, very lush, descriptive writing style. It's very immersive and I really appreciated it. And I will say it isn't purpley, if that's even a word. It isn't so heavy on the purple prose where it detracts from the story. In the end, I gave this a 3 out of 5 stars. While I did enjoy it, I do have a little bits of criticisms. Besides Ali, I wasn't as attached to the characters as I would have liked. And then it's a very slow story. It's like for like the first 75% of the story, it's just political machinations, and then the last 25% is just a crap ton of plot. And so I think I would have preferred a little bit more plot, a little bit more character development, but other than that, it's a really good story and I would highly recommend picking it up. So I've been talking for about an hour and thank God I'm done because I'm thirsty now. But yes, so those were all the books I read in the month of September. Feel free to comment down below. Let me know some of the books you guys read in the month of September. I hope you enjoyed this video. I hope to see you soon with another video. And until then, I will see you soon. Bye.